Welcome to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. One of the real joys of interviewing authors is getting in on the ground floor with a first novel from an author who delivers the goods right out of the box. And that's just what's happening here. What's more, our guest today is a native Oregonian like myself, who has certainly paid his dues, having served in the trenches as a high school history and Latin teacher for the past 5 years down at St. Mary's School in Medford. He earned his BA in history with a focus on pagan and Christian interactions in late antiquity from the University of Portland, and a master's with a focus on royal saints in high medieval Scandinavia from Fordham University, where he was also a teaching assistant, writing coach, and a blog editor for the history department. He's a bit of a polymath as well. He speaks Spanish, Italian, and Latin, played semi-pro soccer in Romania, Spain, Portugal, and Germany, coaches an all-girls soccer team, has taken up Brazilian jiu-jitsu, is an avid video gamer. His academic memberships include the American Historical Academy, American Classical League, and the Hagiography Society. He's also a first-rate writer whose first novel is a page-turning fantasy called Children of the Dying Hearth. We are very pleased to welcome Martin Nelson.
Thanks for being, or thanks for having me.
Yeah.
I'm happy to be here.
You have so many interests. Were you always going to be a writer?
I always wanted to create
Ah,
ever since I was a little kid. You mentioned at one point in that glowing review of me that I was an avid video gamer. Ever since I was 3, 4 years old, I'd watch my older brother play video games, and I'd make up stories in my head to little side quests, or I ended up drawing little maps on sketchbooks of fantastical little quests and adventures, that sort of thing. And so I always had that real creative kind of fantasy drive hidden in me somewhere. And it was actually when I was in Germany playing soccer that I ended up penning Children of the Dying Hearth. I was over there playing twice a day, basically training twice a day, and I had so much time on my hands in between that I'd either be watching German television to try and brush up on my German, which is sadly kind of lapsed into the words I shouldn't say,
yeah.
um, and just kind of back into that fantasy world. And so I started having the kind of core of the series idea because it's actually the first book in a series of 6. So the first one is published. It's all out there, Children of the Dying Hearth. You can find it on my own website, martinraynelson.com. You can find it on Amazon, all online retailers. But the second one is in the editing phase right now, and the third one's about halfway written for a manuscript.
Yeah. You know, it's technically your first novel, but it
Mhm.
sure doesn't read like a first novel. It reads like a writer's already found his voice. And I want to mention that it looks like you won an honorable mention in the L. Ron Hubbard Future Writers Contest
Yeah,
for a shorter story you turned in.
yeah. Which actually that one is called the Journal of Dr. Rudy J. Gleeman. And it was a bit of a science fiction, not quite dystopian, but it was set in the near future. And I originally planned that for being a longer story, but I had kind of the nugget of the idea kind of pop into my head of basically a what if ethical scenario. And
Mm.
I just kind of started writing about it and expanding on that a little bit. And it was also after a pretty healthy Lovecraft binge because I'd always heard before I'd read Lovecraft of what a great gothic horror suspense writer he is. So I read one of those big Barnes and Nobles collection that has like everything but maybe some letters. And, so there's a bit of his voice in that short story, which when you said I found my voice perhaps already in Children of the Dying Hearth in this first book. First of all, thank you. But second of all, I think it's from so many different iterations of it, so many different drafts of going through and finding each character's voice because it is a multi-perspective novel. So whether it's the 13-year-old pirate or the 500-year-old elf, they have different ways of speaking, different ways of thinking about the world,
Mhm.
and really kind of compartmentalizing that that part as I'm writing it is one of the enjoyable processes, but it can also be one of the frustrating ones when I go back and edit. I'm like, this reads much more as a Damien chapter rather than a Kell chapter or a Faye chapter. So I've read and reread and edited and re-edited so many times that it's definitely not a first draft.
I have, yeah, there's difference between first draft and first published by a
Yeah.
long ways. And yeah, wow, that was just amazing and so interesting. I lost my train of thought there for a second. Oh, this is something I do like to ask people who are planning on multi-book sagas. Do you know the ending right now in your head? Last scene of
Uh,
the last book.
the final scene of the last book, there's a vague image of it. I know the
Okay.
core events of everything, of
Okay.
all six books. I know them, the main bits. And
Mhm.
one of the things that I like to do is I didn't actually publish this. I sat on it as a completed draft or completed work for the most part for about 7 years.
Oh,
Um, and it was one of those things of getting really busy, one with teaching and coaching and traveling and all these things. So having the dedicated time to sit down and continue writing was tough. But now I'm in a much more kind of stable environment to write. And so I think it was 2 summers ago, I just cranked out the second book as a rough draft.
yeah.
And then over the last year, I've been editing it, and I've finally given it to someone else to like take a look at this,
Mhm.
mark it up, do everything you can to it. Um, and the reason I bring that up is because I have the main elements of every book there. I know the main kind of character arc of what's going to happen
Mhm.
for each six, but in terms of the nuance, not at all. That's one of those things that I think that would also take away from the creativity of it,
Mhm.
because there's so many times, and especially writing the second and the third book, where I'm thinking this would be such a neat idea, but it feels kind of random if it's not hinted at or alluded to in some way. Um, and so when I finished that second book as a rough draft, I was like, I should put something in the first draft or the first book, Children of the Dying Hearth, before I actually publish it. And so I dropped a couple little Easter eggs in the first one that will lead into things in the second one. And the same's true now for the second going into the third.
That's fascinating. W- One thing that really stands out to me, and I read a lot of books, interview a lot of authors, is the multitude of themes that you're able to weave into this. You've got a quest, a hero's journey, multiple coming of age tales, a pirate saga, a desert trek, political intrigue, high fantasy, ancient prophecies, and a hint of romance in there. So, my way I look at it, you're only missing the Western and the police procedural, which you'll probably have by book three.
Uh, well, you could make a case there's a little bit of the police procedural in there. No, and that's one of my biggest issues actually is when I'm trying to kind of market and sell the book until I met with my publicist, Brian Feinblum, and he really helped me kind of like, no, what is it about? And the thing that I always went back to is the heart of the story is that everybody, regardless of who you're at, whether you're the middle-aged politician or the coming of age pirate or the mixed race person in the city who's trying to find their voice and not be seen for your identity
Mhm.
as what's skin surface, that sort of thing. Um, Regardless of who you are, the heart of it is we have a childlike tendency to stay where we're comfortable, which is where the part of the title comes from. Um, However, in order to truly grow, you have to get out into that discomfort. You have to get out of your comfort zone and go where sometimes you need to know. You're aware that that is where I need to be. Other times it's more of just the driving force of your life puts you there. And it's the decision of do I sink back into that comfort zone, into the dying hearth, that crumbling house that there may be a smoldering wreckage of a fire still going, or do I go off into the snow today and get uncomfortable and cold because out there is my actual kind of destiny. And so, regardless of who the character is, and they have many differences, as you mentioned, um, each one of them has that internal journey. And it's not so much they're not all the hero's quest to go slay the dragon. It's a much more internalized journey for some of them, which is also why I place this book as kind of a new adult fiction rather than young adult, because it has more nuance, I feel, than some of the young adults fiction where it's much more just right on the nose. Here's what it's about. Here's the obvious. Gotta go slay the dragon. The dragon, in some people's cases in the book, may be the relationship between a parent and them.
Yeah.
Of in order to get out from under the kind of auspices of their parents, or parent singular, they need to tell their parent, I'm an adult. You need to treat me as an adult, whether you like it or not. And if that means me
Mhm.
leaving the house, I'm gone.
Yeah.
Um,
There's an allied theme, a quote that runs through the book. Maybe if I do this, you'll all change.
mm,
And that feels like magical thinking to us because that's
mhm,
kind of the definition of magical thinking. But
yeah,
that has different resonance in a universe where magic works.
yeah,
So, and again, that's kind of all of us are guilty of saying, if I just do this, this will happen. So,
mhm. Yeah. And that you're getting at one of the main characters is Worf. He's a middle-aged, not quite middle-aged, I won't say that. He's in his mid-30s. I don't want to say that because I'm in my mid-30s and I don't want to be middle-aged yet.
not yet. It's
He's like
coming.
mid-late 30s. He's been pirating all his life, and he had a run-in with an individual that just really ruined his worldview. It shattered everything that he knew as a pirate who says, if I want this, I'm going to go take it. I'm going to go with the strongest captain that will bring me the greatest riches. And I'm going to live the life of me, me, me. And there's an individual that he meets that just wrecks his psyche. And she says, maybe if I do this, you'll all change. And does a certain action that I don't want to ruin
Oh, yeah.
the
Yeah.
the climax or the big plot point there. But it's especially as a teacher, it's amazing how, I mean, out of the mouth of babes, right? It's the idea that sometimes the greatest wisdom, as simple as it can kind of sound in that dreamy, magical sort of way, it can sometimes be as simple as that. Of an action, sometimes very drastic, can just change someone's worldview
Yeah.
totally,
Yeah.
so that they do a 180 on who they are. And it's part of what happened with him that actually gets him introduced in a way to Sea Rat, who's the younger pirate who he takes under his wing,
Yeah.
kind of teaches him the ropes of the ship.
Yeah. And I should tell people if I almost suggest this even for slightly younger than you are, because a lot of our viewers these days are involved with a lot more stuff, exposed to a lot more than certainly I was in my childhood. But there's a lot of characters to identify with in this from whatever age level you are. And I find that fascinating as well. One of the reasons it reads so well is there's an immense amount of world building behind the scenes on this. You can just feel that. One of the examples is Simon the Ice Weaver, who was
Mm,
able to create giant spikes of ice. And you sum up his story in 4 sentences, and but those 4 sentences resonate with about the half a book behind it. So
yeah,
um, I
there's
love that. I love that.
there's a lot that's not included in the book that I have written, and it's one of those things where I really don't want surface level fantasy. Um,
Mhm.
it's and I'm with a master's in history. My wife, she thankfully enjoys this. That when we're watching a movie, I just pick out plot holes left and right, and she's like, "Yeah, why didn't they do that?" I'm like, I don't know. And as now a writer, I really don't want that to happen with mine. I
Mhm.
want there to be good explanations for why didn't they do this? Why didn't they do that?
Mhm.
And Simon's one of my favorite characters. The pirates in general, I just enjoy writing so much. I think there's a good catharsis to it. But actually, going back to what you said before, of there's
Mhm.
kind of identifying yourself in several different characters. Um, that is my goal, because I don't want this to be a strictly, like I said, young adult or new adult even. I want
Yeah.
someone who is middle aged, who is maybe wondering, like, all right, I've accomplished my career goals. What do I do now? It's like, well, you're in your comfort zone now.
Yeah.
So if you want to change something, you have to get out of that. I don't think it's any uh, kind of great mystery than why Tolkien had Bilbo go on his adventure when he was 55.
Mhm.
It's one of those things of, it's the adventure isn't just for the young, it's for
Yeah.
everyone. And
Yeah.
so identifying yourself, I identify myself with every single character, funny
Yeah.
enough. But that is really the goal, for whoever the reader is.
Let me ask you a procedural question because I have this vision of the serial killer task force in the room with the giant whiteboard with the cards and the strings going all over
Yeah.
the place. Is that the kind of things going on in your background?
Uh, yes, but it's all digital,
Yeah.
thankfully. Or not thankfully, because sometimes I would love to take. I use Scrivener to write, which has a fantastic platform to basically draw up those sort of connections, and you can do different pin notes and whatnot. Um, I would love to have that on a wall and be able to track things and do all that, but I don't have the space for that, and that's I also don't want to open my garage and have my neighbors going like, "What is that insane person doing in there with what sort of serial killer are they tracking?" Like, no, it's for my book.
Yeah.
Um,
He's putting that tin hat on his head again. We should be
yeah,
careful. Yeah.
yeah. um, so yeah, I have a lot of notes and a lot
Mhm.
of kind of digital sticky notes.
Yeah.
Uh,
I gotta throw another bone your way. I love the fact that the heart of the place is Crux,
mm,
which is got multiple levels of meaning there because it's the source of the problem of corruption, but it's also the center of the kingdom, if you will, if you want to call
mm.
it that, of the world as it is. Um, and also, crux means cross as well. So there's maybe a hint of religious significance in that as well. And I know that you're got interest in that direction.
Yeah, all my educational background is more or less in the study of Christianity and Catholicism, and really just religion um, throughout the Middle Ages. So there is a heavy, heavy influence, and aspects of religion will play a more important role as the series progresses. In this first one, Children of the Dying Hearth, it really is much more the kind of the paving stone for everything. It's meant to build up more intrigue in the world rather than just bash you over the head with here's all the religious background of every
Yeah.
single character. It's like that. I get people really do love the Silmarillion, but I don't think it's a great way to introduce readers to a series by saying here's the full cosmological background of every character, every race, every. I have it all planned out, but I know most readers won't really want to see much of that right away. Um, I I'm very happy with how parts of the second book are really shaping up because they when with your mention of Simon the Ice Weaver, um, there's other aspects of that that will come up with a new narrating character, Thena, who's a female dwarf. She's one of the rulers, and she has a I love her story arc, but there's a couple things that I was able to incorporate because one of them is as a medievalist, I've taken a lot of influence from my medieval studies and put it in my own way. Um, one of the things that I actually teach in my Vikings class is we read what's called the Rigsthula, which is a foundational text for the Norse about where the classes came from, the different class system
Huh.
within Norse society. And I made my own document of that. I created a full poem for it with all the different house families and the creation of why certain families are farmers, certain families are
Yeah.
miners, certain families, et cetera, et cetera. And writing that out fully, and then in the second book, just having little hints to it and allusions, it to me makes it much more engaging and a richer story overall.
But
So I'm
basically,
really excited about that.
you've written a story Bible for your whole concept, is what you've got
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
And
yeah,
when the people do that for the showrunners for various series, they have a Bible that has all the real important stuff about it,
yeah,
so that different writers can write in that universe.
yeah.
Um, how long has this one been out? I haven't checked the publication date on it.
So this has now been out for 2 years, I believe.
Okay,
It came out, I want to say December 21. It came
okay,
out.
right in
Um,
the middle of all the fun and games. Yeah,
yeah, it's during
well,
during the time when people are really getting uncomfortable.
yeah,
What's
exactly.
going on here?
Well, I guess what I was going to ask you, I know you're getting great reviews. You're getting some five-star reviews on Amazon. The Publishers Weekly speaks highly of you. Um, how are the kids at school reacting?
Well, that actually it kind of brings in another review, which Kirkus had some. They had a good review on it, but they had some fun language with it, which was they mentioned there's some grotesquerie, and there's one scene that they describe as ghoulish. Um, and part of that is because I wanted this to be fairly accurate for the characters, particularly the pirates.
Mhm.
And so when the students discovered that I had written a book, they were interested in it. And one of the things I actually checked with my administration about before I even published it was there are scenes of violence, there's scenes of some adult interactions. There's nothing I
Nothing
would
salacious about it. I'll put it
yeah,
that way.
there's nothing salacious, there's nothing gratuitous about it,
Yeah.
which I mean it's the way I described this to someone else was it's not the next entry into the Saw movie franchise.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not just a bunch of torture porn.
Yeah.
Um, but at the same time, if you do any sort of honest research into real pirates, Edward Teach, Charles Vane, these are brutal individuals,
Yeah.
very, very brutal. And so I wanted to pretty much have a honest depiction of real world pirates. And so part of that then meant including scenes that Kirkuson described as kind of grotesque.
Yeah.
And when the students discovered it, I was like, uh-oh, this is
Yeah.
possibly bad. Should I have written under a pen name? My administration was like, no, it's this is your work. Go publish it.
Yeah.
It's
Bless their hearts.
own it. Good for you. Um, but when they found it, they actually loved it. I just had a former student and soccer player of mine reach out to me recently because she's, I think, a junior right now at university, and she was asking about the second book. When's that coming out? And I was saying, I can send you a little teaser of it if you want, but I can't give you the full thing right now. That'll be hopefully coming out at the end of the year, but we got to see other plans coming up because actually my wife and I are expecting our firstborn at the end of this month, start of next month. They keep moving the date forward. So
Congratulations on that one. You talk about changing your life,
yeah,
massive changes. Just
yeah,
be prepared. As I
yeah,
say it as a long-term parent and grandparent. So yeah,
yeah,
it'll
yeah.
happen to you.
Definitely out of my comfort zone. So
It's, oh, definitely, especially at 3 a.m. Yeah,
yeah.
that'll come. Um, I have to throw a different tack. What was it like to play pro soccer over in Europe?
So I do want to give a slight clarification because I would say semi-pro. I was in one of
Okay.
the lower divisions. In I ended up in Germany, but I did an academy in Romania, Spain, and Portugal.
Mhm.
And that was first time I did the academy, I was 19, and then second time I was 21. And after that, I ended up getting picked up by, or I was kind of seen by a German scout, and he said, "Coming over to Germany." And so I played for a season over there with a lower division team, which was, I mean, neat. He's like, "You can live here rent free, like room and board's more or less taken care of. Here's a car to drive around." I mean, it wasn't any sort of Ferrari or anything. It was a
Yeah,
little VW Golf that is, you're basically giving me a car to go
yeah,
drive around and go to practice and everything, which is great. Doing that as a low 20-year-old was a lot of fun.
yeah.
It was also deeply inspiring because I had just finished my undergrad. Um, and so living in Europe, I'd been to Italy when I was 14 with a school trip, and that was amazing. I was not as appreciative as I probably should have been as a 14-year-old. After you see the 500th church, you're kind of like, it's another very large church. I'm
Yeah,
tired of walking.
yeah,
And it's a very privileged thing to do, but at the same time, going back as an adult, much deeper appreciation for it, and being able just to kind of wander around Frankfurt or Bad Homburg, where I was located. It was very inspiring for definitely the medieval settings um, that I really want to evoke throughout one part of the Crux, but the Crux is a little bit more based off of late antiquity Rome.
ah,
It has much more of that kind of fallen empire feel, where you're
mhm.
living in a city that is on the decline, but the people don't necessarily know it.
Yeah, yeah. And again, because we have a little small slice of time, we don't see that
Yeah,
in this
yeah,
in that decline. if it comes on gradually enough.
Yeah.
Um, just it occurred to me that is your background in the soccer overseas. When you're coaching soccer here, are there different styles of coaching that you picked up there that you're using?
Yeah, there's more of an international, especially when I was over there. There was kind of a not quite universal, but there's a movement in the international soccer community that was moving towards kind of a almost universal style of play. The Dutch had a little bit different. The Germans were just dominating everything uh, during that time. They won all the Euro under 20, under 18, like all the all the youth were winning. They had just won the World Cup, so Germany was the powerhouse, and their style was more or less being adopted by everyone. The Spanish, not so much, but I'm digressing. The when I come back here, it's interesting to see the American style of play, which is adopting more European styles.
Mhm.
I think part of that's just because of success. Different coaching styles. I think this also gets into teaching. That the more you experience, the more you're going to learn. And if you're not learning from multiple experiences, then uh, you need to change the view of yourself because we don't know everything, right? So every time I engage with a new coach, I go into it, even if I don't like the coach, what can I learn from them?
Yeah.
Uh, there was a fantastic coach I worked with several I worked with in Southern California. I used to coach at Modern Day High School, which is a very, very big high school, and got my start coaching there under Matty West, who's a great guy. But one of his JV coaches, a guy named Lawrence, he gave me some great advice that said every good coach is a thief. And if you're not stealing from other coaches in terms of like what they're doing and what's
Yeah.
working, then you're not going to be a good coach because you'll be set in your ways of this is always going to work.
Yeah.
Whereas if you play against a good team, you're like, well, what are they doing? Oh, they're doing that. I need to do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
um, it's very much adapt or die within that
Yeah. It's
situation.
best practices kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
Um,
Well, I should steer back to the book because you're so easy to go down these rabbit trails because you've
oh, it's
got
fine.
so many interests is all. I have to talk a little bit about Sea Rat, one of my favorite characters in the book, because it's a real surprise. I don't want to spoil the introduction of him, but it caught me off guard, I'll say that. And the fact that he's a real great entry point to teach about the culture and what's going on in the pirate because it gets
Yeah.
explained to him as he's happening to him. We feel that vicariously. And I have a feeling that was more fun for you to write than maybe some of the other parts.
The pirates in general were just kind of fun. It's uh, they're hard to describe why it's fun. Maybe it's because of just catharsis. But there's also, I think, a bit of just lost adventure in writing about pirates of
Yeah, straight up.
especially in the digital age. I mean, if people are worried about being tracked and everything. It's like, well, you carry a track around every day with you with your phone. Um, so writing about characters who are totally lawless and all they want to do is go out and do their own thing and pillage and plunder and we'll take what we want. There's a direct line from that from one of the later pirates later on when he's singing a song. Um, the follow-up line isn't totally appropriate, so I won't say it, but it really is a take what you can, take what you want, and live your best life. And it really is
Yeah.
like your best life, not thinking of anyone else, which is why I really enjoy Sea Rat and his relationship to Worf
Mhm.
because it provides a kind of introduction to, as independent as they are, a kind of filial quality between those on the ship, where there's this idea of like, yeah, if my buddy next to me dies, I might get some more loot, but at the same time, I got to make sure that if I save his life, he might save mine. There's a
Yeah.
brothers in arms aspect, as independent as they are. Sea Rat, though, I think this is true with most fictional youth characters. Um, is they, as much as they operate for their own hero's journey, they operate as the lens of the reader.
Mhm.
I mean, I think of Harry Potter as a
Oh,
fantastic
sure.
of as a reader, we don't know anything about the magical world, and neither does Harry. So let's find out through him.
Yeah.
So he's a vehicle for the reader as much as anything. I don't know many people that are going to want to endure what Sea Rat endures. I don't know if there's many people who really want to run away from home and go join a pirate ship. But at the same time, I think of people that have a life in a town that they're not happy with. I feel like the classic story in America is growing up in a small town in the Midwest. They move out to LA to become an actor.
Mm.
And I would say, looking at the last couple years of what happened in Hollywood and what was revealed, it's Hollywood kind of functioned like a pirate ship. Of the captains in command really had their way with people and did whatever they wanted.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yeah, and so this is, I think, also the deep joy for me of writing fantasy is writing a story about a actor or actress who moves to the valley and tries to make it big in Hollywood. I lived in LA for a bit, but I don't have a lot of experience with trying to do that, so it would be tough. But writing from a historical perspective about a pirate who tries to do a similar sort of thing of go out where it's very dangerous and deal with predatory people, that can then speak to the actor or actress who's trying to make their way, but they keep getting preyed on by an agent or producer or director or whatever it is. It's a vastly different world, but it's the same human experience, which is really why I like writing fantasy. Is you can boil it down to the human experience rather than the kind of situational experience of the real world.
Well, it takes a writer's observational eye to think of those connections like that. So obviously, it's the force is strong with you, young one. Um, when you the phrase that maybe if I do this, you'll all change, isn't that a bit of the author's hope in writing a book?
Yeah, there's I think there's, I mean, you could read Dostoevsky and still find hope. It's uh, there's hope, I think, in every book, of whether it's a warning hope or just a hopeful message in general. There is and I think for Children of the Dying Hearth, for this first one, and honestly for the series going forward, it's the hope that people become more introspective, and they start to realize their comfort zones, where they're at emotionally, spiritually, physically, professionally, whatever it is, and whatever kind of unhappiness they have in their life. A lot of it comes down to perception. From which case, I take a lot of influence from the Stoics. I love Marcus Aurelius and Seneca, and there's some of that will be coming out as more books progress. But it's the greatest enactor of change in your life is you. It's not someone else. So if you're uncomfortable, do something about it. If you're too comfortable, you're not going to grow. And if you want to grow, then do something about it. Yeah, so there is a hope there, but it's for every reader again, and this is why I label it as new adult. I feel like the emotional maturity will be more there for the 16, 17, 18 and up rather than the 12, 13. Teaching a couple 12, 13-year-olds, I have an 8th grade Latin class that the level of introspection isn't always there.
It's very distractible at that age. I recall. Yes.
That's like herding cats.
Is there anything we've not touched on you want to make sure that our listeners know about you, the book, the series?
I think we hit a lot of the high points. Once again, if people are interested, and I hope they are, they can check out my writing, not just for Children of the Dying Hearth, but for everything. There's a free download of the honorable mention award-winning short story that I wrote. That's up on my website. That website is martinraynelson.com. There's also my academic writing up there. So if anyone is more inclined to see what I wrote academically about late antiquity or Denmark in the High Middle Ages, there's a couple samples up there as well. Yeah, I just hope people check out the book. It's on every major online retailer for ebook. I believe Amazon has the physical copy, and I'm not totally sure about Barnes and Noble, but yeah, you can find it on Amazon. It's in hard copy, hardback, and an ebook. So
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. Been very generous with your time today. I appreciate that. Our guest today, Martin Nelson. The book is Children of the Dying Hearth. All the best, and we will be back for book 2 when that comes out.
yeah, I'd love to be here.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Roger.